Mornings with Zerlina, now on Sirius Progress.
Welcome back to Mornings with Zerlina, continuing our Earth Day conversations. Joining us is Dr. Michael Mann, director of the Penn Center for Science, Sustainability, and the Media at the University of Pennsylvania, and author of Our Fragile Moment, How Lessons from Earth's Past Can Help Us Survive the Climate Crisis. Good morning, Dr. Mann. Thank you so much for being back with us.
Thanks, Zerlina. It's great to be with you.
So you're somebody who says we should not be in a doom and gloom mindset. And I think that's the perfect start of this conversation on Earth Day. So, how are you feeling about where we are in terms of the climate crisis, and why shouldn't we be doom and gloom?
Yeah, I'm feeling a little gloomy, to be
Okay.
to be honest. It's a challenging time. There's no question about it. And not just when it comes to climate, but when it comes to like basic sort of principles of democratic governance, which seem to be evaporating with each passing day of the current Trump administration. And as I've said before, there's no meaningful path to action on climate that doesn't go through a functioning democratic governance in the United States. So that's the real threat. The obstacles, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again, and this is a reason, if you will, for sort of very cautious optimism. The obstacles as yet are not physical, and they're not, technological. We have the technological, infrastructure to decarbonize our economy. It's not too late to prevent catastrophic warming if we take deliberate and urgent action. But the obstacles remain, and they're political. Mm-hmm. So what we need to do is to find a way to basically tackle the current threat to our democracy and to governance. If we are to make any progress on climate here in the US, a little bit more good news. The rest of the world is actually moving on, okay? And they're going to do it with or without us. So we will tackle this crisis. The question is whether the United States will be part of that and whether we will get left behind as the rest of the world moves on.
So that actually did help a little with my feeling of doom and gloom, honestly, because I think that before the 2024 election, I was in so many television segments where I was talking about the importance of American democracy, and I was told that it's really the economy, it's really the cost of eggs that are more important.
Yeah.
And I would jump in and be like, no, actually, democracy is the only way to address any of the problems that we want to address, and that includes the climate crisis. And I think that what you said, democracy is essential. The democratic government is essential in addressing the climate crisis. Yeah. And if American democracy goes away, that doesn't mean that the rest of the world democracies are going away. They're doing stuff. We're just being left out.
No, that's right. And, we saw a close call in France, but, sort of democracy survived there. It looks like, the sort of the liberal government will prevail in Canada. And so there's no question there. This is a sort of a global movement right now, this movement towards fascism, and we're fighting it on multiple fronts in multiple countries. But it appears that, we may be starting to successfully push back against that. And if the US gets left behind, then, in the end, the world moves on, but we lose out in terms of our economic competitiveness. I mean, people need to understand that what Donald Trump is doing right now is a major threat to their children, to their grandchildren, to us right now, in terms of, if you don't care about the future of the planet, and there is no economy on a dead planet, I would remind listeners. But even if you don't care about the planet, you don't care about the environment, you don't care about the future of, our planet, our children, grandchildren, he's destroying the economy, and we're losing out because the rest of the world, China is moving forward with solar and wind. They're leading the world. And here Trump, just today announced, what was it, several 1,000% tariff on Chinese solar panels. The only reason that you would do that is if you are acting basically as an agent of the fossil fuel industry and of petrostates like Russia and Saudi Arabia. And that's what we're seeing.
We were talking to Congressman Sean Cassidy yesterday about some of the things that the Trump administration has done in this term versus what the Biden administration was doing, and it was exactly what you're saying. They're implementing policies that benefit the fossil fuel industry, but actually at the same time they are hurting the fossil fuel industry, and like more broadly speaking, because of the impact on the overall economy. That was what he explained to us.
Right.
Can you talk a bit about the moves that they're making in this second term that are damaging to the climate and the the impact we could have positively on the climate crisis, and also maybe they're not as bad as they could be because they're pretty incompetent?
Yeah, and that's what saved us the first round, Trump 1.0. They were just incompetent in implementing the agenda that they were told to implement. Right? This didn't come from Trump. Trump is not a genius, stable or unstable. The marching orders come from above. They come from the various plutocrats, libertarian plutocrats like the Koch brothers and Leonard Leo, telling them, look, if you want us to support your administration, this is what you're going to do. This is who you're going to put at EPA. Here's who you're going to put at Department of Energy, et cetera. And they were just very clumsy about that. They weren't going to make the same mistake twice. And this time they came in with a plan. We know what it's called, Project 2025. They came in with a plan to make sure that they implemented their agenda on day one, and they got the people into those agencies that they needed there to implement that agenda. So that's where we are right now. They are successfully implementing the Project 2025 agenda. They're dismantling the agencies in the government that are responsible for environmental protection. They're actually dismantling, to some extent, our entire government. And you have to ask, if Trump and the Republicans were taking their marching orders from Vladimir Putin, how would it, and Saudi Arabia, how would it look any different from what we're seeing? And the answer is it wouldn't. It looks like that's what they're doing. They're destroying this country for the benefit maybe of a small number of plutocrats who figure they can jump ship with their money, and some of our greatest adversaries, Saudi Arabia and Russia. They're the Trump administration is working with them.
I mean, I guess they're going to have to get more of these spaceships because, we're talking about the global climate crisis, which impacts every corner of the earth. And it always baffles me when people don't realize that, no amount of money is going to make you completely immune from the consequences of the climate crisis, even though, I guess you could get on one of those spaceships, rockets, and go to pre-space, which is what I call it. In your book. Okay,
I was just going to say, if you saw the movie Don't Look Up,
yes,
right, that's exactly what they do. And I won't give no spoilers here. It doesn't work out too well for them. But that's what the Musks and the Bezos, who are literally investing their money in spaceships, think they can do. And it would be humorous. It would be funny if it weren't so dangerous, because they're putting the entire planet in peril because of their own selfish and naive worldviews.
In your book, Fragile Moment, you talk about the Earth's climatic history. What are some of the lessons we can learn from that history?
Yeah, thanks. So, it gets back to this basic, premise that we started the conversation with, sort of urgency versus agency, right? Like, yes, it's urgent. Bad things are happening. Much worse things will happen if we continue to warm the planet by continuing to burn fossil fuels. And the paleoclimate record gives us numerous examples of that, where there were large inputs of carbon into the atmosphere naturally and over much longer timescales. But we see that there were extinction events, for example, that were related in part to fairly rapid natural climate changes. Well, we are changing the climate far more rapidly than anything that we see in the paleoclimate record. And that means we and other living things have far less capacity and time to adapt to the changes that we are creating. And, if we continue on that course, it's easy to imagine our civilizational infrastructure, which is based on a stable climate and technological infrastructure we've built with that climate that support more than 8 billion people on this planet. If we continue to change that climate, more extreme weather events, coastal inundation, extreme heat, we will exceed our adaptive capacity. And the paleoclimate record gives us numerous sort of analogs for that. At the same time, it also shows that there's a certain amount of resilience in the climate system, and what we see in the record reinforces that the models that we use to project future warming have things about right. The models are doing really well. And what those models tell us, importantly, is that if we bring our carbon emissions to zero, the planet stops warming up almost immediately. And so there is this immediate and direct impact of our efforts to act. And that's where the agency comes in. It's not too late. And the greatest threat, ironically, now to taking the actions necessary is doomism, is the belief that it's too late. And bad actors, Russia and Saudi Arabia, as I said, petrostates that, use bot farms and troll farms and bot armies to sort of poison our online discourse, our social media discourse. They've actually fanned the flames of doomism because they realize if you really come to believe there's nothing you can do about it, then it leads you not to the front lines, but it leads you to the sidelines, and you're not on the front lines demanding action.
If the United States is left out of any substantial climate action, but the rest of the world does do what you just described, what happens then to the overall issue?
Yeah. And one of the things I worry about, of course, is we are the world's largest legacy polluter. We've put more carbon pollution into the atmosphere than any other country. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Those are the basic facts. And that means we are the most responsible for the warming that's already taken place and the damage that's already being felt, especially in the global south, poorer countries that don't have the infrastructure that we have. So that means it's extremely important for us to be asserting leadership. And when we did do that under Barack Obama and to an extent under Joe Biden, we saw other countries sort of step up their game, raise their game. And now we're seeing the opposite, right? With the US now pulling out of any meaningful global climate agreements, we are, the danger is that other countries will say, well, hey, the US, which has contributed more to this problem than anybody else, isn't going to do their part. Why should we? We should have the same opportunity to burn dirty but cheap fossil fuel energy to build our economies the way the United States did, even if it's going to negatively impact the world. That's the danger. Thus far, it doesn't appear to be what we're seeing. In fact, we've seen even greater resolve on the part of China, which today is the largest emitter. Right now, as they're industrializing their economy, they put more carbon pollution into the atmosphere right now than any other country. Historically, we've put more carbon pollution into the atmosphere overall, and that's ultimately what the climate cares about. But right now, they're the leading polluter, and it seems like they're stepping up their game. They're investing in solar and wind and other renewable energy technologies, and they're making them available at low expense to the rest of the world. So China has the opportunity to be the leader, and I'm sure that they would love the sort of political capital that they get in the world from becoming the world leader on climate. What is a loss for us becomes an opportunity for them, in terms of global politics on the world stage.
Do you have any theories as to why they're taking the opportunity and we are not? I mean, it's
That's a
just
great question.
because of the fossil fuel companies make a lot of money? Is it really the answer?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I have a good friend of mine, Christopher Wright, who's at the University of Sydney, who's made a very compelling argument in his work that ironically, it may be authoritarian governments, command and control governments like China that are best situated to act on climate because they can just decide to do it. And they don't face the same obstacles that you do sort of in a democratic country like the United States politically. And they're a technocracy. They, a lot of very high level officials in the Chinese government are scientists and engineers, and they get it. So they understand that they are paying. And by the way, the healthcare costs that the country that China is paying, and they pay it themselves again because it's an authoritarian country. The government's the one who pays for any damage, and they are paying huge healthcare costs because of the sort of the legacy of air and water pollution in China, and increasingly because of the damage caused by climate change. So they get it. They see it's hurting their bottom line. They understand it's good economics to act, to reduce, to mitigate climate change and the impact that it's having on their very large population. And they have a very large elderly population that is extremely vulnerable to increasing global heat stress. And so I think the bottom line is they get it. They understand that this is the greatest threat to the world and thereby to them as well.
You mentioned early in the conversation misinformation and disinformation. Are there any telltale signs that something is misinformation when we see it in social media? Like, are there any talking points that they use all the time that we should be like, oh, that's coming probably from a bot farm or something like that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's just a little gratuitous plug here. This is something we talk a lot about. I have a book coming out in September, Science Under Siege. I didn't expect it to be quite as relevant and prescient as it's going to be. We started writing this before the last election. But it's co-authored with Peter Hotez, who you may know. He's a public health scientist.
Yes, I do.
Yeah. So, I mean, it came about because we were comparing notes, right? Peter deals with the, this online assault and from politicians, Republican politicians, this constant barrage, these attacks because of the threat that his work on vaccines and COVID-19 represents to sort of the Republican Party with their anti-vax, ideology and with their anti-lockdown ideology. And so it's interesting to compare notes because what has happened in the public health space since the pandemic is like an accelerated version of what has happened over decades in the climate space. Like first they deny, and then when they realize they can't deny it anymore, they deflect attention, they divide the public, and all of the tactics that we've seen sort of deployed over time by fossil fuel interests to prevent action on climate, and that includes poisoning social media, like you said, with bots and trolls. We see the same thing, many of the same sorts of talking points. And one commonality between them, for example, is this appeal to libertarian ideology, to what they see as sort of a core conservative value, that this is taking away your liberty, right? Acting on climate, reducing carbon emissions, pricing fossil fuel pollution is taking away your liberty to pollute. They don't want you to be able to fly anymore to see grandma for the holidays, and they're going to take your hamburger away from you, right? And then it's almost the same rhetoric with COVID-19. It's that they're taking away your liberty. You have the right to choose whether you mask, whether you take vaccines. And so what they've done, the same forces, and it's the Koch brothers and other plutocrats who are behind both of these campaigns. What they've done is they've weaponized that rhetoric to create this army of climate deniers and COVID deniers. And you see that online, and the talking points when you see them, because there is a commonality between them, whether it's climate or COVID.
And I feel like, I mean, and this is because I'm the daughter of a scientist, and people that listen during COVID know my dad.
I didn't know that. What area?
Microbiology.
Oh, awesome.
He's
Great. Yeah.
he has a degree in biochemistry, and he's a professor of microbiology. And
Awesome.
so during the pandemic, he, knock on wood, kept my family from
Yep.
contracting COVID-19, and a lot of people who actually listen to the show just because he was following the science. And this is why Dr. Hotez is somebody that I'm very familiar with and have interviewed during the pandemic years. And I feel like that broader attack on just objective fact and objective science is something that we have to push back against, because during the pandemic, when people were asking ridiculous questions, I was like, I'm just going to go along with what the scientist says, because they know what they're talking. I mean, like, they're experts in this, and you're listening to like a TV host or something.
Yeah, it's such a good point, Zerlina. We have to realize that this is part of a larger assault, right? It's tempting for us to think about in terms of climate, the assault on climate action, and that's a big part of their agenda, no question. The fossil fuel industry, big part of what's going on here, and Project 2025 was essentially written by them for them. And the sort of anti-COVID messaging in there, it has more to do with libertarian values. But early on, the Koch brothers sort of fomented the flames of sort of COVID denialism because they were afraid of lockdowns. It would hurt the sale of fossil fuels. It was their bottom line, and so they created organizations that promoted anti-science in the public health arena, just like they had done in the climate arena for years. But the point being, this is part of a larger assault. It's an assault on, elites. It's an assault on objective fact, on a fact-based discourse. There's an assault on academia, and I'm on the front here at the University of Pennsylvania. We see that, we're on the front lines of these attacks on experts, people who can provide objective data and objective viewpoints that ultimately threaten their agenda. They benefit when people are uneducated, when people are disengaged, when people throw up their hands. They say, we don't know who's right. That only plays to their agenda, and that's what's going on here.
Dr. Michael Mann, thank you so much for being with us to talk about this issue on Earth Day. And the new book co-written with Dr. Peter Hotez, Science Under Siege, is out in September. I am going to be reading that because I feel like this is an issue that I'm a little obsessed with. I'm not like prolific in science, but I do feel like we need more folks in the media who understand the misinformation out there so that we can just talk about facts. That's my jam. Dr. Mann, thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Yeah, thank you, Zerlina. And I'd love to come back with Peter to talk about it with you.
Yes. We will have you back. We will have you back.
Awesome.
Thank you again. We'll be right back after this quick break.